Power can fall apart in strange ways, but King Philip II's end was something else entirely. Imagine a ruler who controlled half the world, now trapped in his own crumbling body. We're talking about a summer in 1598, inside the dark Escorial Palace. This is a story of might meeting total weakness. Philip was once the most powerful monarch on earth. His empire stretched across continents, from the Americas to the Philippines. The sun literally never set on his kingdom. He fought for Catholicism, sent massive fleets into battle, and struck fear into his enemies. But his final battle, it wasn't on some distant battlefield. It was in his own bedroom. For 52 brutal days, this once mighty king lay helpless. Tiny creatures were eating him alive. This isn't just about physical suffering. It's about how power means nothing when your body betrays you. The palace he built as his royal home became his personal prison. A king who once controlled entire nations now couldn't control a single moment of his own terrible decline. Witnesses wrote accounts so horrific that historians thought they were made up. But medical studies proved them true. King Philip II's death was a brutal reminder. Everyone, even kings, eventually turns to dust. Sometimes life hangs by the thinnest thread, and even the mightiest can become a feast for the smallest creatures. King Philip's health started crumbling in the spring of 1598. At 71, he was already an old man by the standards of his time. Gout had been his lifelong enemy, twisting his fingers and toes into painful knots. Walking became a nightmare. His body betrayed him bit by bit. But Philip was no quitter. Even as his body failed, his mind remained sharp. He'd review state documents, scribbling decisive notes that could change entire kingdoms. Then June arrived, and everything got worse. Fever struck him down. Nasty abscesses erupted on his knee and hand, bursting and refilling with disgusting fluids. Doctors tried their best. Bloodletting, desperate remedies, but nothing worked. The mighty king was reduced to a shell. He could barely move, dependent on servants for his most basic needs. His legendary Spanish dignity dissolved. The man who once commanded respect now lay in his own filth, unable to even change his bedding. July brought pure hell. The abscesses spread everywhere, chest, groin, legs. A putrid stench filled the palace. Courtiers covered their noses, desperate to escape the smell of rotting flesh. Philip, still aware, ordered windows shut, not for his comfort, but to spare others from the horrific odor. His body was a landscape of bursting, oozing wounds that never healed, just festered and grew worse. The king was trapped in agony, unable to move, without pain shooting through his body. His bed was a breeding ground for horror. By early August, lice appeared, maybe brought by servants, maybe from the filthy sheets. Either way, Philip's rotting body was perfect for these tiny monsters. The lice multiplied fast. They fed on his blood and dead tissue, swarming so thick that no matter how hard the attendants tried, they couldn't keep him clean. His confessor, Diego Deeps, even claimed the lice bred inside his wounds, crawling out of his own decaying flesh. The most powerful man in Europe had become a living nest of parasites. Attendants collected lice by the handful, only to see new swarms appear within hours. But the lice were just the beginning. Royal physicians watched in horror as maggots invaded his open wounds. Imagine a man once believed to have divine healing power, now covered in squirming larvae. Servants cleaned the worms daily, but fresh ones always returned by morning. Philip knew every horrifying detail. He found solace in his faith, whispering prayers about his sins. As August ended, his condition worsened. Massive bed sores ate through his skin, revealing bone. One wound on his right hip was so large you could see inside his body, a fist-sized horror with its own grotesque ecosystem. The king's final days were a nightmare of decay. Historians recorded that attendants had to clear away massive amounts of rotting flesh daily, filling 2 silver basins with putrid material. The wound became a horrifying playground for maggots. They multiplied faster than anyone could remove them. These tiny monsters burrowed deeper when disturbed, literally eating the king alive from the inside. Flies swarmed everywhere into his mouth, nose, and ears. Philip, once a powerful monarch, could do nothing but suffer as insects crawled across his face. His body was a battlefield of pain. Gout made every touch feel like burning coals. When servants tried to move him or change his bedding, his screams rang through the palace. The same king who had watched heretics burn now begged his own servants for mercy. His mind remained sharp, which might have been the cruelest torture of all. He knew exactly what was happening to him. Despite everything, Philip held onto his faith. He requested daily mass and religious readings. Even as his body disintegrated, his spiritual resolve never broke. When possible, he would discuss state matters with his son, the future Philip III. By early September, his body betrayed him completely. Relentless diarrhea weakened him further. His kidneys failed, causing painful swelling in his legs and belly. The mighty king was reduced to nothing more than a suffering shell. His skin was stretched to breaking point, creating new wounds that invited infection and parasites. The court doctor saw the king burning with fever and delirious, clear signs that deadly infection was taking hold. When lucid, Philip would ask for a special crucifix, the same one his father clutched at his own death. This connection to family seemed to comfort him, even as his body fell apart. The treatments were likely killing him faster. Doctors followed ancient medical beliefs, using harsh substances like arsenic and mercury on his wounds, burning already damaged tissue. Constant bloodletting, sometimes daily, stripped away what little strength he had left. In his final weeks, Philip survived on thin broths, watered wine, and soft bread. Infections, parasites, blood loss, and poor nutrition were destroying him. His heart struggled, causing palpitations and breathlessness. The summer of 1598 seemed determined to finish him off. Central Spain was brutally hot. The Escorial stone walls trapped heat like a furnace. High temperatures bred lice and flies that tormented the dying king. His chamber windows were barely cracked, trapping a horrific stench of decay. By early September, death was inevitable. Despite immense suffering, Philip remained conscious enough to bless his children. His son, the future Philip III, was devastated. The young prince could barely stand the sight and smell of his father, now a broken, infested shell of his former powerful self. In a final act of royal duty, Philip tried to pass on his last wisdom to his heir. Philip's final days were a stark lesson in mortality. He spoke weakly to his son, using his own broken body as a warning. "I've been treated like an old dog," he said. The prince listened, uncertain whether this was a warning about power or just the bitter words of a dying man. On that September morning, Philip's last rites were a horrific scene. His confessor could barely touch him without causing pain. Flies swarmed around the holy oil, drawn by the overwhelming stench of decay. It was a grotesque moment where divine ritual met human suffering. His breathing became a struggle. Each labored breath carried the smell of his dying body. At 5 a.m., with a crucifix on his chest, Philip took his final breath. The mighty king of Spain was reduced to nothing. Preparing his body for burial was a nightmare. His remains were so decomposed that they crumbled at the slightest touch. Embalmers worked frantically, drowning the corpse in perfumes and spices, but nothing could hide the truth. They rushed the sealed casket to the royal crypt, hiding the evidence of his horrific decline. Across Europe, the news spread like wildfire. In Protestant lands, people whispered and smirked. The great Philip, too, brought low by his own failing body. A king reduced to rot and ruin. Rumors spread like wildfire. Pamphlets claimed Philip's horrific death was divine punishment for the Inquisition's cruelty. Queen Elizabeth I, his old rival, muttered something about the trials of princes and our shared mortality. In Catholic Spain, the story got a makeover. Official records cleaned up the messy details. They transformed Philip into a pious, dignified king, a symbol of Catholic virtue. The Spanish people heard a sanitized version. Their monarch died as he lived, strong and faithful. Doctors now believe Philip was a medical disaster waiting to happen. Gout, possible diabetes, a weakened immune system. His body was breaking down, attracting maggots to his bed sores. The mighty king who once ordered thousands to die couldn't even defend himself against tiny insects. It was brutal, humiliating. A powerful monarch reduced to rotting flesh. Historian William Prescott nailed it. No amount of wealth could save Philip from basic human vulnerability. His death wasn't just gruesome, it was a lesson. Power means nothing in the face of mortality. Kings and peasants alike must confront the same ugly truth of physical decay. Philip's high status just meant his suffering would be remembered forever. The ultimate irony? This man who fought wars for divine right, who saw himself as God's chosen defender, died without any heavenly intervention. No miracle, no rescue, just a painful, undignified end. This most Catholic king met a death that felt more like divine punishment than a merciful release. It was as if God had abandoned him. Philip's death marked the beginning of Spain's slow downward spiral. His son, Philip III, lacked the fire and skill of his father. Spain began to crumble. Territory slipped away. Power faded. Some say the horror of watching his father's suffering made the young Philip afraid of leadership. He preferred pleasure to responsibility. He handed power to his favorites and stepped back. The Escorial Palace, once meant to be the heart of a global empire, would never again pulse with the same energy. Over time, it became a monument, impressive but hollow. Today, visitors walk through royal apartments where Philip suffered. They hear softened stories that focus on his faith, not his physical breakdown. His death reveals a brutal truth. The distance between ultimate power and total weakness is shorter than we imagine. The king who once ruled continents couldn't control his own failing body. A stark reminder that power is temporary, fragile. Philip II is remembered not for his conquests, but for how he died, a prolonged nightmare of decay. From mighty ruler to helpless victim, alive yet not truly living, aware of every painful moment. His personal papers supposedly contained a haunting line: "To have been and not to be is not to be at all." A king obsessed with legacy, ultimately remembered for his gruesome end. Philip's final moments were brutal. His body betrayed him, slowly consuming itself while he still breathed. In the end, all his royal power meant nothing. Death stripped away his crown, his wealth, his status, reducing him to just another mortal suffering. The mighty king lay there, reduced to flesh and pain, proving that no amount of power can stop the inevitable march of mortality.